Good evening. Welcome to this Candidates Forum for the 49th House of Delegates District. I'd like to welcome Mr. Timothy Kilcullen, Mr. Alfonso Lopez, and Mr. Terry Marchlin. We appreciate you taking out the time to be here to talk to us and to answer questions on various issues that have been submitted by members and other attendees. My name is Anu Sahai, and I'm the co-president of the League of Women Voters of the Fairfax area. We're an over 500 member strong organization and committed to nonpartisanship. We thought last year was an aberration and that we would be back to meeting in person, but out of an abundance of caution, we have decided to conduct our forums virtually again this year. We're pleased to partner with a number of community and service groups in sponsoring this forum. We are all nonpartisan and nonprofit entities. Like the League, our partners are committed to supporting the democratic process by providing these opportunities to meet and question the candidates and compare their responses and to encourage community participation. We're grateful to our many volunteers who have worked tirelessly to put together this virtual event. We particularly thank all of you for attending tonight. I'm sure you all have a lot of exciting things going on, so appreciate that you're with us tonight. Democracy only works when we all participate, and as we say, democracy is not a spectator sport. We all have to engage to make it work. We want to know our candidates and the values they stand for and their positions on issues that are important to us, and I can assure you that there are a lot of those. We look forward to a lively and respectful discussion of the issues. This event is being recorded and the video will be up on YouTube. So here's the format. All candidates certified to appear on the November 2 ballot were invited to participate. These candidates will have 1.5 minutes or 90 seconds for an opening statement, 1.5 minutes to answer each question, and 2 minutes for a closing statement. Each candidate will have the opportunity to answer the same question. We will pose the question to the candidates in the order in which their names appear on the ballot. After the first question round, I will pose the next. So the second question first to the second candidate, and so on and so forth. And the candidates will give up to 90-second answers to your questions. Our timekeeper, Ethan, will provide 30-second, 15-second, and stop alerts. We will follow the timing rules strictly. The candidates and their campaign may not record this event and are not permitted to use any pictures or videos of this forum found on our website, implying an endorsement of either candidate. After the forum, candidates will be sent a list of the questions that had been submitted, but due to paucity of time remained unasked. They may post answers to some or all of the questions on their tables. Let's get started. Mr. Lopez, please make your opening statement.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for organizing this debate. I made a pledge 10 years ago that I would be a champion for our values, and I've kept my promise. I'm proud to have served in the House of Delegates as a progressive champion, including now in senior leadership as the majority whip. Over these years, I've been the co-patron, or the chief co-patron of over 150 bills signed into law, addressing everything from the environment to small businesses, education, and criminal justice reform, to in protecting immigrants, to tenant protections, temporary assistance for needy families, and sensible gun violence prevention. I'm especially proud of my legislation that created in-state tuition for Dreamers, brought back project labor agreements, dedicated $800 million to help revitalize the Chesapeake Bay, and my bill that created the Virginia Affordable Housing Trust Fund that served as the backstop for eviction prevention during the COVID-19 pandemic and provided housing for thousands of families, including right here in the 49th District. And as the House Majority Whip, I'm honored to have, among other things, increased teacher salaries by 5% last July, secured a dedicated source of revenue for Metro, banned the death penalty, created the first state voting rights act in the South, perhaps most importantly, expanded Medicaid and healthcare protections to 500,000 Virginia families. Simply put, I believe in fighting for a Virginia that lifts everyone up and leaves no one behind. I'm excited to be here tonight, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lopez. Next, we'll have Mr. Kilcullen.
Thank you, Ms. Sahai, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this event and inviting me. I chose to run after seeing just after 9 minutes the House of Delegates greenlight Northam's plan to give $750 million in tax credit subsidies to the Amazon Corporation to construct their traffic flogging HQ2 in Crystal City. We've seen how Amazon's repaid this generosity. They censored anti-lockdown writers because they knew the lockdown was good for their bottom line. They silenced President Trump because his tax reform and pro-America trade policy empowered their competition. They tried to resort to bribery to get Pentagon contracts, and they slandered patriots with their unregistered super PAC, the Washington Post. And now they have paid to donate critical race theory curriculum developed by hate leader Ibram X. Kendi to Arlington Public Schools. This curriculum teaches our students to see everything through a racialist lens and to view America as inherently systemically evil. It is not fair that Amazon is treated better than our local businesses. That's why we need to fight Amazon. That's why I'm running for House of Delegates.
Thank you. Mr. Marchland, would you like to make your opening statement now?
The opportunity to present this evening, and thank you, the League of Women Voters, for the historic groundwork that you've laid for participation in and knowledge of the issues in our elections. I'm here tonight to say that we can return to a vibrant Virginia based on the boldness, the imagination, the consensus building, the compassion, and the common sense that have made Virginia one of the nation's leaders. As we meet tonight, undoubtedly, we confront many challenges. I think these challenges have been deepened by some poor decisions made by the governor and the General Assembly in public health, public safety, economic inequality, educational quality, the human right to life, and election transparency. We can overcome these errors with our long-held values. And yes, we can acknowledge history that we wish had not happened without it dividing us from the quest for a better life for all today. So I propose to you tonight those steps that will lead to a better and vibrant Virginia, a better quality of life based on those traditional values and institutions, an open economy, educational choice and excellence, respect for the law and life, support for public safety through our police and communities, transparent elections, stewardship of our environment, taxes that aid but do not overburden our economy, and comprehensive approaches to public health. Let community decision-making and strong families grow. Let's balance the thirst for freedom in our national DNA with the goal of a more perfect union. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marchland. So let's begin with our questions. Our first question goes to Mr. Kilcullen, and the question is on redistricting. Are there any concerns regarding the fairness of the redistricting process? How would you improve or change it?
Well, after ballot measure 1 last year, the redistricting process is being done by a nonpartisan commission. It's no longer being done by the legislature. And so I don't want to mislead anyone on what a member of the House of Delegates could or couldn't do. However, I hope that it's fair. I certainly don't want to see partisan gerrymandering. And I also don't want to see threats of lawsuits hurting the districting committee's ability to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kilcullen. Mr. Lopez, would you like to answer this question now?
Yes, I'd be happy to answer the question. My opponent got it wrong. It's a bipartisan commission, not a nonpartisan commission. And that's really the issue and why I voted against Amendment 1. What you're talking about here is essentially almost unworkable process where you have 2 sets of maps, 2 sets of lawyers, and an almost impossible process for reconciliation of those maps. You also have, as of right now, an issue with going backwards in terms of minority representation. And then also the bill, as it was passed, had 3 poison pills put into it by the Republicans. One, that it wasn't nonpartisan, which is what we've been fighting for from the very beginning, and that it was a bipartisan commission. Also, that any 2 members of one body could basically have a veto in the commission, and then at the end of the process, that it would go to the state Supreme Court, which is a 5-2 Republican majority body. So if we're talking about true nonpartisan redistricting, we're not getting it.
Thank you. Mr. Marchand, would you like to answer that question?
I had in previous campaigns, I've always been a supporter of ending gerrymandering. The bipartisan approach I supported. I've been a little bit disappointed at what I have seen thus far. It seems for both parties pretty partisan. I am encouraged by what they call this ensemble of maps, sort of a technological innovation that allows the many aspects of the three principles of redistricting that can be used. I hope that will help to settle some things. So far, it appears from what we have heard that there won't be a lot of changes. I've always wondered whether this particular district was gerrymandered in the fact that it's in two counties, the other two candidates being in Arlington, myself in Fairfax. Mr. Cullen and I are at the very edges of the district. You walk across the street and I'm in another district. But so let's see what happens. But I would say this, that if this turns into a totally partisan matter, then the nonpartisan commission would be better. But that either are better than what we had before. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Marchand. So the second question will be for you, Mr. Lopez. And this is on taxes and budgeting. Would you support raising new revenue through reforms like enacting a state capital gains tax or ending wasteful tax breaks to ensure adequate funding for children's health, safety, and education? Do you have any other ideas for raising new revenue?
Yes, I would actually be open to raising new revenue, and there are several different ways you can actually do it. One is through increased taxation of some of the larger corporations coming into the state, and increasing taxes on some of those bodies. Also, we definitely need new revenue. Right now, over the special session, we got a significant amount of money from the federal government through the Federal CARES Act. And that has given us a soft cushion in terms of addressing some of the really significant needs we've had in the Commonwealth as a result of COVID-19. What does that mean? That means we've got $524 million for affordable housing, which is very near and dear to my heart. You've got a significant amount of money that's going to HVAC systems in schools. You've got a significant amount of money that's going to the social safety net. The problem is the cliff that's coming when those funds are run out. And so in order to address some of these significant shortfalls we have in the state, I would definitely be open to additional revenue.
Thank you. I will repeat the question since it's a bit long for you, Mr. Marchand. You're up next. The question is, would you support raising new revenue through reforms like enacting a state capital gains tax or ending wasteful tax breaks to ensure adequate funding for children's health, safety, and education? Do you have other ideas for raising new revenue?
Thank you. In general, I am not for increasing taxes in Virginia. As a state, we have the 37th, we're ranked 37th in terms of tax burden. I think that gives us a distinct advantage over neighboring jurisdictions. There's no doubt that there are some parts of the state budget that are strained. I do think that there are some exemptions that we need not have. We certainly should keep the exemption for being able to fund certain private schools that are on the approved list of the state. But taxes or user fees on particular items that are a choice for people, such as the tax on plastic bags that's been raised now in Arlington and Fairfax County, I think are reasonable because they involve a consumer choice. They're in my view, a user fee. But in general, we need to keep our position as being a very business-friendly state. In the long run, that will produce revenue and more jobs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marchand. Would you like me to repeat the question for you, Mr. Kilcullen?
No, I think I've got it.
Okay.
The tax system here in our Commonwealth, it's rigged. It is not fair that Amazon got $750 million in tax credit subsidies and then got even richer from the lockdown that never should be imposed. If we want to raise revenue, we should go after Amazon first. We should make them pay back the $750 million. We should take away their tax credit subsidies. We shouldn't go after local businesses or Virginia families.
Thank you. Third question, we'll start with you, Mr. Marchand. This question is on campaign and political finance reform. Do you support real-time electronic disclosure of donations to any political campaign or organizations?
Yeah, certainly I do. I think that the special interests that fund candidates, that those contributions need to be revealed immediately. There are rules in the state campaign finance system now that require reporting within a very short period of time right before the election. A lot of the incumbent candidates have ties to many of the organizations that have supported them for years, and I feel that those ties in the end do influence legislation one way or the other. I'm not accusing Mr. Lopez or any other delegates of being corrupt or anything like that. I'm just saying that money makes a difference in the legislation that's passed. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. This question is next for you, Mr. Kilcullen, and I'll repeat it one time. Do you support real-time electronic disclosure of donations to any political campaign or organizations?
Well, certainly to political campaigns, to candidates. What I wouldn't support is doxing unaffiliated activist groups. The campaign finance system in Virginia, it's not fair. If you want to talk about in-kind contributions and massive spending, why don't we look at the fact that Amazon has used their numerous platforms to promote their candidates, and if they promote their candidates, that's never listed as an in-kind contribution. But now there's always a threat for local, let's be honest, generally conservative activist groups to dox their members, expose them to harassment, expose them to targeting. So that is deeply wrong. But for us candidates, yes, we should be as transparent as possible about who's funding our campaigns.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Kilcullen. Mr. Lopez, I will repeat the question. Do you support real-time electronic disclosure of donations to any political campaign or organizations?
Yes. I mean, I'll expand, but yes. My first week in the House of Delegates, I sat down where I approached the then Republican Speaker of the House, Bill Howell, and asked him, or basically expounded on the fact that you could drive a Mack truck through our campaign finance laws in Virginia. We're the Wild West, unlimited donations. We are currently, now that Democrats are in the majority, finally, we are currently studying through a panel campaign finance reform. And we're going to do several things where we're going to work on outlawing using campaign funds for personal use, like several former Republican delegates used to do on a regular basis. And along the same lines, let me just reference something so that everyone's very clear. When it became clear that Amazon was going to build HQ2 in the middle of the 49th district, I basically said, I'm no longer taking Amazon funds, Amazon donations. And I also voted against the Amazon deal because there was essentially a going back on an affordable housing deal we had for Arlington and Alexandria. Did I vote for the university campus that was built? Yes, of course. But I'm one of the few people, and I actually spoke on the floor in opposition to the Amazon deal because of what it meant for affordable housing and the people in 4 of the poorest communities inside the Beltway.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez. Would you like to take this question now? Mr. Martin?
Yes. So the question I think you already posed to me, right, was on immediate reporting on campaign financing. Am I correct? You're muted, so yeah.
Sorry about that. So we'll go on to question number 4. which starts with Mr. Kilcullen. This is about voting rights. Do you have concerns, positive or negative, on the changes in Virginia election laws from last year? For example, no excuse, drop boxes, ballots being accepted until the Friday after election day?
My biggest issue with the voting procedures right now is that if you vote and this includes if you voted in the 2020 election and check the box, they will now automatically mail you a ballot without you having to request it. And that something like that is ripe for fraud. So issues like that, I do not think are okay. I think, I think we need to crack down on fraud. We need to support election integrity. I have not seen fraud in Arlington or Fairfax County yet, but if we keep mass mailing ballots that weren't even requested, it's going to happen. We saw it in Georgia, we saw it in Pennsylvania. We should never see it.
This question next for you, Mr. Lopez, I'll repeat that. Do you have concerns, positive or negative, on the changes in Virginia election laws from last year? For example, no excuse, drop boxes, ballots being accepted until the Friday after election day.
We should be making it easier to vote in Virginia, not harder. In the last 10 years in the House of Delegates, I will tell you, I have seen Republicans consistently try to limit access to the ballot box. And they've gone out of their way to try to call fraud on stuff that is not fraud. They used to say that there was rampant fraud because people were not illegally voting, but they were actually filling in their forms incorrectly. So that was fraud. The fact is that that's simply not the case, that there's rampant fraud. Buying into the big lie is that there's rampant election fraud is simply false. I helped pass each of those bills that were brought up. I'm proud of passing each of those bills that were brought up. And I'm proud of the fact that one of those bills was the first state voting rights act in the South, because we need them now, especially under what the former Trump administration was trying to do across the country and what's happening now in other states to limit access to the ballot box. It's ugly, it's wrong, it's not who we should be. And I'm proud of the fact that Virginia's done the right thing on expanding access to the ballot box, making it easier for people to vote, especially folks who it's not that easy when you've got to go vote on a random Tuesday and you maybe have 3 jobs and have to take the bus back and forth. We want to make it easier for folks to go over a period of time and have ballot boxes, have these options. The other way is no way at all.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lopez. This question next for you, Mr. Martin. I can repeat it for you if you like, or okay.
No need. I'm fine.
Okay.
So I'm glad you asked a very specific question because we hear these terms, voter suppression and fraud, get thrown around all the time. So there are some fixes we need. And please don't conflate these changes that I would like with the claims of former President Trump, nor am I accusing any election officers or anyone of being corrupt or changing votes. I've been an election officer in the times when I've not run for office. I was an election officer in the 2016 and 2020 elections. Now you can vote without a voter ID by signing a sworn statement saying that you are somebody, presumably yourself. That vote is then cast as a regular vote where it used to be a provisional vote. When that person walks out of the precinct, if they're not the person who they purport to be, there's really no way to catch that particular kind of fraud. Number 2, starting in October 2020, before the congressional midterms, you can register and vote on the same day. Just like the bill being pushed in the US House of Representatives by Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats. As an election officer, I feel that's an overwhelming amount of time. Number 3, when you register your automobile at DMV, they ask you if you are a citizen so they can put you on the voter rolls. They do not check that out. If you say you are, you are. Elections can be decided by a few votes. These are some fixes we need right away. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marchand. On to question number 5, and we'll start with you, Mr. Lopez. Question: In a 2020 Pew Research survey, 55% of Virginians supported legal abortion in all or most cases, with 42% opposed. Given this support, what is your position on maintaining the right of women to make their own healthcare decisions? Do you support a woman's right to choose?
Most definitely. What happened in Texas, for instance, is terrifying, and I will not let Virginia go down the same path. It's a stark reminder of the importance of maintaining a Democratic majority. In 2020, I co-patroned and helped pass the Reproductive Health Protection Act, which helped roll back restrictive, disingenuous, and politically motivated measures on access to abortion and reproductive health in Virginia. I will continue to champion pro-choice legislation and ensure that every person is empowered to make their own choices about their body and health. I got to be honest with you. I fought successfully to defend abortion and a woman's right to choose, and both of my opponents would turn Virginia into another Texas, banning abortion at 6 weeks with no exceptions for rape, sexual assault, or incest. That's the wrong way to go for the Commonwealth of Virginia. That's the wrong way to go for the 21st century.
Thank you. Question for you now, Mr. Marshland, the same one, I'll repeat it. In a 2020 Pew Research survey, 55% of Virginians supported legal abortion in all or most cases, with 42% opposed. Given this support, what is your position on maintaining the right of women to make their own healthcare decisions? Do you support a woman's right to choose?
Well, I would rather be right than modern, if you will. Human life is at stake here. So there are two persons involved in a pregnancy, the mother and the baby at an embryonic fetal stage. Make no mistake about it, as Mr. Lopez says, I believe that we must do all that we can to defend the life of those unborn babies. Traditionally, my position has been at the stage at which they can feel pain, maybe the 14th week. The Texas law is consistent with the idea that life begins at conception. I think there could be some administrative problems in implementing that law. So I'm not sure, it depends how that law would be written as to whether or not I would, that bill would be written as to whether or not I would support it. But if you realize what the reality of abortion is, which involves, sorry to test anyone's sensibilities, basically tearing a human being limb from limb and suctioning that baby out. It's a moral tragedy. We need to do more in this country to uphold that respect for life. We had it for most of the existence of this republic. I don't see any reason why we can't go back to it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This question is for you now, Mr. Kilcullen. Would you like me to repeat it?
No, I got it. After this forum, I'd recommend that people check out Ralph Northam's comments on abortion to see just how radical the Democrat Party has gotten on this issue, where he's talking about killing the infant victims of botched abortions after they're born. You can look it up. It's still on YouTube. Now, eugenics groups like Planned Parenthood, they shouldn't get another dollar of taxpayer funds. We should instead be investing in crisis pregnancy centers, emergency contraception, and help for new mothers.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with you, Mr. Marchand, and this question is on economics. Virginia's minimum wage rose to $9.50 an hour in May 2021, the first of 3 increases that will culminate at $12 an hour in 2023. According to research done by MIT, the required living wage in Virginia for 2 adults and 1 child is $17.78 for each working adult. What steps, if any, will you take to bridge this gap?
I support the immediate increase in the minimum wage in Northern Virginia to $15. I continue to support the right to work in Virginia. So my my protection for workers is to increase that minimum wage to a more livable amount, which will in turn increase other wages. Basically, in the economy today, people are doing everything they can to get higher wages, including abandoning some of their jobs that were sub minimum. So the difference that I have proposed with respect to the minimum wage is that, as it was proposed in the U.S. House of Representatives, is that they have a regional outlook, so that the rural areas in Virginia, which are based on really a different rural economy, can start with a lower minimum wage. I think there should be some exemptions or lower wages for 14 and 15-year-olds starting in the workplace. But I asked my sister once, who was a district manager for a McDonald's type entity, if you pay that worker so much, are they worth it? Well, if the worker is worth it, they're worth the minimum wage of $15 an hour in Northern Virginia today.
Thank you so much, Mr. Martlin. Mr. Kilcullen, I will repeat the question since it is a bit long. Virginia's minimum wage rose to $9.50 an hour in May 2021, the first of 3 increases that will culminate at $12 an hour in 2023. According to research done by MIT, the required living wage in Virginia for 2 adults and 1 child is $17.78 for each working adult. What steps, if any, will you take to bridge this gap?
I think if we want to have higher wages and help workers, the number one thing is to not have another lockdown. That was absolutely devastating for working Virginians, and it was absolutely pointless. We should prohibit any other governor from ever instituting another lockdown at the Commonwealth level, and we should stop municipalities from being able to impose this. It might have been popular with the very wealthiest of Arlington and Fairfax residents, but it was not popular with working Virginians. And we should, if we want to actually help raise wages, that should be our number 1 priority. Ban lockdowns, never again.
Thank you. This question is next for you now, Mr. Lopez. Would you like me to repeat the question?
Sure.
Okay, it's Virginia's minimum wage rose to $9.50 an hour in May 2021, the first of 3 increases that will culminate at $12 an hour in 2023. According to research done by MIT, the required living wage in Virginia for 2 adults and 1 child is $17.78 for each working adult. What steps, if any, will you take to bridge this gap?
Let me just say first off that I'm a little flabbergasted. I believe in science and public health guiding our decisions, and burying his head in the sand like an ostrich. I think my Republican opponent would rather mandate that we always open schools and public places and avoid all lockdowns, no matter what. Public health, children's health be damned. So that's not something I agree with. Public health science should be followed. Let me get into, I think, something that is important to know. I completely support and fought for the increase in the minimum wage, and I think it needs to be achieved to the levels we need to achieve it faster, over a faster period of time than we currently have it right now. And I will actually work and fight for that with the Democratic caucus this coming year. Also, I do not agree with the myth that you have to be pro-business and then you have to be, if you're pro-business, you're anti-worker. The fact is that we can walk and chew gum at the same time in the Commonwealth of Virginia. What does that mean? We are the best state in America for business, even during the pandemic, the best state in America for cybersecurity, all of these metrics. And we also went from 51st in the country, according to Oxfam, for worker protection to 23rd in 18 months. The fact is that we need to do better. And so to answer your question, there are a significant number of labor protections and improvements and worker protections improvements that we can do, as well as being the best state in America for business.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lopez. We are on to our next question. This question is on immigration, and I will start with Mr. Kilcullen. A poll conducted by Christopher Newport Wazen Center, published in May 2021, found that a majority of Virginians support providing a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants, 73% of them actually. Almost all Virginians support a pathway to citizenship for children brought to this country illegally by their parents, 94%. Given these findings, what would be your approach to the issue of citizenship for our undocumented residents?
So this question is different from the others because regardless of who wins this election, we're not going to have the opportunity to deal with this. Citizenship questions, they're not done by the Commonwealth of Virginia. They're done by the federal government. I think it would be disingenuous to answer this with my own opinions when, as a House of Delegate, I would have no control over this issue.
Thank you. Would you like to answer the question next, Mr. Lopez? Do you need me to repeat it?
No. First off, my Republican opponent is again sadly mistaken. First off, as the son of an undocumented Venezuelan father who came to this country with $270 in his pocket and the dream of a better life, providing support and equity for our immigrant and new American community is deeply personal to me. That's why, as the first ever Latino Democrat elected to the General Assembly, I took charge on these issues. I founded the General Assembly's first Latino caucus with Elizabeth Guzman and Delegate Hala Ayala. And once the Democrats took the majority, the caucus was finally able to address a number of bills, from DMV reporting protection to driver ID cards. I was finally able to pass the de-ICE bill in response to the Trump administration's malicious and racist zero tolerance policy on immigration, which is something the state could do. This prevented automatic cooperation between local and law enforcement and ICE and restored safety for our immigrant community. I also passed the Victims and Witnesses of Crime bill. They themselves are preyed upon. And the fact is that this is a real problem, or it was a real problem until I passed the bill, because folks were too afraid to report crimes in their community to the police. Now they don't have to be asked what their immigration status is. I'm also incredibly proud of the fact that I passed the Virginia Dream Act and Equity and Financial Aid Act, finally giving these amazing dreamer kids the ability to go to public universities and public community colleges in Virginia. And also I passed legislation this past session to provide emergency Medicaid funding for COVID-19 testing, treatment, and vaccinations, regardless of immigration status or ability to pay. This virus doesn't care whether you're a citizen or not, and when it comes down to providing support to combat it, neither should our Commonwealth.
Thank you.
The fact is, we're 10.5% of the population now, and new Americans are growing. We have much more we could do.
Thank you. Thank you for your answer, Mr. Lopez. This question again for you, Mr. Marchland. Poll conduct.
You need not repeat it. So I'll go right ahead. So immigrants have been part of the lifeblood of making America better. That's they add so much richness here in Northern Virginia. But to continue to extend benefits, and I think that the kids who are here as DACA kids right now deserve a break. It's not their fault that they fortunately happen to be born here. But let's face it, we've got a catastrophe happening on the southwest border. We do not know how many people are coming into our community or will be born in our community. My problem with illegal immigration is that we are on the way to creating two societies, one of which remains largely undercover because they don't want to be revealed. I appreciate that Mr. Lopez has done some things to try to avoid their victimization, but the fact that they're in that status is what attracts that victimization. I do think we should be cooperating with federal authorities. I think that the idea of sanctuary cities, sanctuary states, and so on either side of the spectrum undercuts our federal system of government. And we've got to get back to finding a way to cooperate with one another, even if we do not like the particular party or administration that is in charge. So yes, for helping the DACA recipient, DACA qualified folks, but I don't know if we can do it unless we stop the catastrophe that's happening on the southwest border. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next question, we'll start with you, Mr. Lopez. Virginia still has multiple monuments and roads honoring those who fought to maintain slavery during the Civil War. What is your position on eliminating these vestiges of our racist past That is, for example, Lee Jackson Highway.
I used to intern at the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and I follow their model as on these issues. I also definitely supported each of the pieces of legislation that got rid of the Lee statue in the Capitol, that addressed Confederate monuments in the public sphere. The fact is that when you have a statue in the public sphere, it shows who and what that community values and honors. And the fact is that most of those statues were not put up, right after the Civil War. They were put up during massive resistance. They were put up during the Lost Cause era in the 1920s. They were put up to lionize a cause that is against everything we believe in as a diverse and inclusive Virginia and America. And so, should we be addressing these statues on battlefields in appropriate places? Certainly. But should they be in the public sphere where they cause pain for New American, Latino, African-American populations of Virginia, and they have for decades? I fully support the renaming of highways and allowing the people who live here now to make choices about what we choose to do.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lopez. The same question for you, Mr. Marchland. I will repeat it. I know you know it, but our audience may like to hear it again.
Yes, ma'am.
Virginia still has multiple monuments and roads honoring those who fought to maintain slavery during the Civil War. What is your position on eliminating these vestiges of our racist past? For example, Lee Jackson Highway.
I agree with the general thrust of Delegate Lopez's remarks. But I feel that with respect to statues that are in a local jurisdiction that are not on the state highway or not a major tourist attraction or whatever, that the local county should make that decision. And in fact, that has been happening. The mores of that particular county and the citizens should prevail. For those things that represent the state, I certainly understand the pain that Black Virginians feel with respect to those monuments, and they do have a place, but it should be in museums and battlefields and so on. But I want to caution as we make a lot of these decisions that when you suppress the opinion of particular people, their views, that sometimes that causes those folks to go underground with their views. I'd rather have those views in public and debated in public and decisions made in public rather than going around them. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Marchland. Mr. Kilcullen, so
Yes,
Virginia still, don't mind. Virginia still has multiple monuments and roads honoring those who fought to maintain slavery during the Civil War. What is your position on eliminating these vestiges of our racist past? That is Lee Jackson Highway.
So not all these memorials are the same. Take, for example, Jefferson Davis Highway, renaming that was named fairly recently after a racist psychopath who wasn't even from Virginia. Yeah, getting rid of that name is a no-brainer. However, when you're talking about something like the Lee statue, which had been up much, much longer and depicted a person, a Virginian who fought in 3 separate wars, it seems to me that actions like that are just about making traditional Virginians feel unwelcome. It's possible to see nuance in these issues. So something like the Davis Highway, yeah, good to get rid of it, but we shouldn't just erase all of history.
Thank you. Thank you. The next question will start with you, Mr. Marchland. This question is on the environment. So most Virginians, in fact, a very large majority, support a Green New Deal to address climate change by investing government funds in green jobs and infrastructure. And more than half of Virginians strongly support a carbon tax or cap and trade program to reduce carbon emissions. Given this support, what is your approach to improving Virginia's renewable energy investments? And would you support a legislative action to ensure a cleaner environment for our citizens?
The legislature has made some good strides in doing this already. I do support the responsible direction toward more sustainable energy resources. In Virginia, only a very small portion of our energy right now comes from fossil fueled plants. So we're in a relatively good position compared to other states. With respect to the Green New Deal, I think that if we're going to implement green jobs, we just don't want green jobs in solar panels or just a lower wage type endeavor. We want those things in technology and invest in technology that will help to make things better for the environment. We do have a threat, particularly with respect to our naval fleet in the Tidewater area. Sea level rise could cause them to have to move that fleet. And I think we're going to have to make some hard decisions about land use in Virginia so that we don't invest in ways that would be counterproductive to the advent of climate change in our state. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we'll go on to Mr. Kilcullen. Mr. Kilcullen, it's a longish question, so I will repeat it. So most Virginians, in fact, a very large percentage of Virginians support a Green New Deal to address climate change by investing government funds in green jobs and infrastructure. And more than half strongly support a carbon tax or cap and trade program to reduce carbon emissions. Given this support, what is your approach to improving Virginia's renewable energy investments? And would you support legislative action to ensure a cleaner environment for our citizens?
Well, Ms. I know you don't write the questions. Half of Virginians do not support a carbon tax. That's fake news. And I think when we look at these environmental policies, we should, as Delegate Lopez did for the previous question, look to Texas. They put a ton of their energy into wind power, and then there was the first freeze, and it shut down half their electrical grid. It caused absolute chaos. We've seen corporations like Amazon try to censor the stories talking about it, but people knew their power was gone. And this is actually very similar to lockdown, and that these top-down measures from supposedly pro-science elites end up really, really hurting working families. So we should not be supporting importing AOC's Green New Deal to Virginia. That's a terrible idea, and it's not supported by Virginia.
Thank you. Actually, this question was based on a poll that was conducted by Christopher Newport University, but again, like you said, I didn't write the question. Will you take on this question now, Mr. Lopez?
Yes.
Should I repeat it or?
Sure.
Okay, so a poll conducted by Christopher Newport Wesen Center in May 2021 showed that the majority of Virginians strongly support a Green New Deal to address climate change by investing government funds in green jobs and infrastructure. And over half, 53%, strongly support a carbon tax or cap and trade program to reduce carbon emissions. Given the support by a majority of Virginians, what is your approach to improving Virginia's renewable energy investments? Would you support a legislative action to ensure a cleaner environment for our citizens?
Let me just begin by saying my opponent just said the words pro-science elites. Let that sink in for a second. All right. I'm the founder of the Virginia Environment and Renewable Energy Caucus. I've been fighting on these issues ever since I got into the House of Delegates. I worked in the Clinton White House at the Council on Environmental Quality. I worked in the environmental community, and I was a member of the B team working on National Ambient Air Quality Standards, Safe Drinking Water Act, and the Kyoto Protocol. I'm incredibly happy about the Virginia Clean Economy Act, which was passed. It's one of my favorite memories from my time in the General Assembly. Not only did it move Virginia from one of the worst states on climate change to one of the best, but it also forced Dominion Energy to comply in ways it never had before. It makes the Commonwealth one of the leading states in the nation acting to cut carbon and accelerate the transition away from fossil fuels. It eliminates all power plant emissions by 2045. It implements Virginia's first mandatory standards for utility-led renewable energy and energy efficiency, and it cuts red tape surrounding rooftop and third-party solar installations. That's not all. The VCEA also requires all coal-fired power plants to close by the end of 2024, creates a new program to reduce the energy burden for low-income customers, requires Dominion Energy to prioritize hiring local workers from historically disadvantaged communities, and to work with the Commonwealth to advance apprenticeship and job training, and it includes an environmental and fisheries mitigation plan. The fact is, I was also able to pass the Solar Freedom Bill, and the cap and trade program you're talking about, RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, was passed in 2020. We have moved the ball forward incredibly, and I'm incredibly proud of it. And I'll keep fighting to make Virginia a pro-environment.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Lopez. On to our next question, which is on childcare. And we're going to start with Mr. Kilcullen this time. Lack of affordable childcare limits the ability of many women to return to the workplace or continue their education to allow them access to better paying jobs. What policies would you support to ensure that parents have affordable childcare so they can work and or go to school?
Well, as I said with the abortion question, I support investing in more childcare options for lower income mothers. At the same time, if we want to help workers, mothers among them, we need to not have another lockdown. And I don't think we should drop this issue because it's going to come back. And we do not want another Ralph Northam or Terry McCullough or some municipality to shut down people's businesses. If you're trying to raise a family, you should have the right to earn an income. And lockdowns go against all of that. So I think the number one priority to help working mothers and to help all parents in Virginia is to ban lockdowns. Ban them at the Commonwealth level, ban them at the municipal level, ban them.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The next, Mr. Lopez. Lack of affordable childcare limits the ability of many women to return to the workplace or continue their education to allow them access to better paying jobs. What policies would you support to ensure parents have affordable childcare so they can work and or go back to school?
It's not just mothers, it's also fathers, it's family members, it's aunts and uncles, it's grandparents. And this is something that we've been focusing on over the last year and a half in a way that we haven't in the past. I'm very proud that the Democratic caucus has finally begun tackling this issue. You'll see that we've put money into this during the special session, especially as it meant addressing COVID-19. And we've also begun studying ways to improve upon these programs going into the 2022 session. And so I am incredibly honored to be endorsed by organizations that are fighting for this specific issue in this election cycle. And I will continue to fight because it's not just an issue for the impoverished where it is a significant problem. It's also an issue for the middle class. It's an issue for folks here in Arlington. All up and down Columbia Pike, this is an issue. And so I'm looking forward to what comes out of the studies that are out there. And I'm also looking forward to the legislation that we will pass this coming session.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Martland, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, that's not necessary. I favor some child care assistance for lower income Virginians. I do not think we should be subsidizing child care for those with higher incomes. We'll have to be careful where we draw that line, but there's a tendency to keep raising it. The philosophy here should be that if you're paying more for childcare than you're making at work, then obviously that doesn't work, and you cannot be there. So with the new federal assistance for child credits. That should enable more lower income Virginians to go to work. And by the way, even during the pandemic, a lot of those low wage folks had to go to work. And so they left their kids a lot of times too, having less education and so on. I do think that the lockdowns and the lack of in-person public instruction this last year was a big detriment, caused a lot of other problems. And hopefully, and that there wasn't a good scientific reason for it. The Catholic and private schools were in session. I substituted taught in my own parish school. If there was a need for a break, to quarantine, they took it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're on mute, ma'am.
Damn, sorry. So this will be our last question. And we will start with Mr. Lopez. So are there opportunities for Democrats and Republicans to find common ground on any of the issues we discussed tonight?
Oh, goodness, yes. On issues like childcare, on issues like renewable energy. I'm incredibly heartened by the fact that Lee Ware, Terry Kilgore worked with the Democratic majority on certain aspects of the Virginia Clean Economy Act to move Virginia in the right direction and change our course when it came to climate change and actually how we have our overall energy how we have what we do to prioritize our energy sources. But there are so many other areas that we can work on together. I've worked in the past with colleagues of mine on temporary assistance for needy families issues. I've worked in the past with some of my colleagues on criminal justice reform issues, on immigration issues in Virginia. And so what I'm very proud of as the majority whip for the House Democratic Caucus is constantly communicating with both Democrats and Republicans to move positive policies forward in Virginia, to change the dynamic of the Commonwealth, to reinforce our social safety net, to provide transit and transportation, to address the environment and renewable energy, to address sensible gun violence prevention. All of these things, we can find common ground, and I'm very proud of the fact that I have in the past.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Marchland, do you think there are opportunities for Democrats and Republicans to find common ground on any of the issues we discussed tonight?
I think there are two that are near and dear to my heart. One is criminal justice reform. I think both sides are ready to understand that we can improve our system. Although I do not like the idea of cashless bail in many circumstances, our criminal justice system is still governed by who has money and who doesn't with respect to to freedom and the courts. We have to do better. We have to involve the community more. And I think that the failure that we've had in this area is a reason for both to cooperate. The second is youth programs. We undervalue and do not pay adequate attention to our young people. There are so many things that could be done to bring our young people into participation in our governmental system. And in leadership. So we've overlooked that and underfunded it for years. Things there can be better. Those are two areas in which I think we can have a lot of cooperation in the future. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Kilcullen, do you believe there are opportunities for Democrats and Republicans to find common ground on any of the issues we discussed this evening?
Yeah, absolutely. And clearly there were common ground on some issues tonight between us, especially on the helping childcare. I also think another issue where my opponents and I are in agreement is opposition to defund the police and supporting Arlington law enforcement. I am happy that the Arlington candidates are not in on that kind of extreme partisanship. And I think we can move forward supporting law enforcement. I think both the Arlington Democrats and Arlington Republicans are on the same page there. Thank you.
Thank you. So That was the last question. And the last part of our program is the closing statements by all the candidates. We will be reversing the order. So we will start with Mr. Marchland first, then Mr. Kilcullen, and finally, Mr. Lopez. So Mr. Marchland, you have 2 minutes. Thank you.
I appreciated the opportunity to exchange our views tonight. I think we're all better informed for it. A lot of areas of agreement, as well as some clear disagreements. I'd like to thank Delegate Lopez and candidate McCullen for your pursuit of public service. And I'd like to thank those who have helped me selflessly in this and previous campaigns. So you've heard a lot about our policy positions tonight, but you're electing a person in who you must believe is trustworthy, capable, and representative. So here is who I am. I'm a determined person. I've overcome adversity. I've beat the odds at several crossroads in my life. I've worked at almost every level, and my relationships span the socioeconomic spectrum, so I understand the barriers to mobility. I try to be a tireless warrior for my cause and a diplomat for solutions. Because of my experience in the Congress, I understand legislation, I do my homework, and build the relationships that you need to be successful. I understand responsibility. I had the ultimate experience of being responsible for the lives of my troops in a combat zone in Vietnam. For 20 years, I worked with young people across this country, and I understand how every decision we make is so important to their long-term future. I've given of myself for many years as a volunteer locally and nationally. I consider myself, and I strive to be a patriot. I try to act as my God would want me to and love my neighbor as myself. But you ask, all considered, then, why elect me, an independent, well, with little funding and few endorsements? Well, I think the answer is, that is the answer. I can serve without debt to any special interest. I have no interest in any present or future gain. I have no blind eye to the excesses of one political party. So tonight, folks, on this one time, vote for whoever you want in the other elections, but in this election, vote for the party pooper.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Marchland. Next up, Mr. Kilcullen.
So it is not fair that after just 9 minutes of debate, the House of Delegates gave special privileges, special subsidies, special immunities to Seattle monopolies, while our businesses were locked down, our schools threatened with closures, and our families facing ever rising taxes. This is not fair, and we can fight Amazon. We can pass a common carrier law that means so long as they get these liability protections, this campaign finance immunity, they have to respect the 14th Amendment and stop silencing dissident voices on their numerous platforms. We can ban critical race theory so they can stop pressing their indoctrination of hate on Arlington and Fairfax public schools. We can ban future lockdowns so people feel more comfortable investing in our local businesses. And we can demand that they pay back the $750 million they stole from the taxpayer and actually have a fair tax code. Now, please check out my website, Calling for Virginia. Check out my Facebook, and please vote. Thank you so much, Delegate Lopez, Mr. Marchland, Ms. Sahai, League of Women Voters. Good night.
Thank you. Mr. Lopez, you have the final word.
Thank you all for your questions and for attending this evening. Experience matters, leadership matters, results matter. I'm humbled by the support of so many elected officials and community leaders, including Senators Tim Kaine, Senator Mark Warner, Congressman Don Beyer, and Speaker Eileen Fillicorn. I'm also proud to have been recognized for my work with awards and endorsements from numerous organizations, including the Virginia Education Association, NARAL Pro-Choice Virginia, the Arlington Firefighters, the Virginia Interfaith Center, the AFL-CIO, the Latino Victory Fund, Clean Virginia, the National Organization of Women, and the League of Conservation Voters. I'm also proud to have been named the 2021 Virginia Legislator of the Year by the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. They understand, as I do, that politics is about getting things done and improving people's lives. Going forward, we need to create more prosperity and do it in a way where everybody wins. We need to invest in our infrastructure and in our workforce, and most of all, in our children. To do that, we need a delegate with experience and a deep, nuanced understanding of public policy and the legislative process in Richmond. The issues before us are too important to settle for anything less if we're going to keep Virginia and the 49th District moving forward. I pledge to continue fighting for better schools, transportation solutions, Medicaid for all, environmental safeguards, economic development, criminal justice reforms, and our values of embracing diversity, tolerance, and compassion. I will continue to be a champion for our values and priorities. I will continue fighting for the community I love. My name is Alfonso Lopez. I'm running for the House of Delegates again to help build a better future for my kids, my family, and for you and your families. I ask for your support and vote on Election Day. Together, let's continue building a Virginia that lifts everyone up and leaves no one behind.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lopez. So that brings us to the end of this candidate forum. We hope that the concerns and questions of our audience have been addressed and answered to their satisfaction. Thank you so much, Mr. Lopez, Mr. Kilcullen, and Mr. Marchland for participating tonight. We invite you to visit their campaign website. If you still have questions, in fact, we still have some questions left over that we could not get to, we will be sending them to the candidates, and perhaps we'll see the answers on their websites. If you still have other questions, please go to our website, lwv-fairfax.org, and look for candidate forums. You can even send more questions there. Several election laws have changed again this year, so please check out our website as well as vote411.org. Thank you all for being here. Voting has already begun, and as the candidates also said, please go out and family, friends, and neighbors to do the same. Good night, and thank you. Thank you very much.